There's a specific kind of person who will open their banking app late at night, stare at the number for a few seconds, and then close it quickly, as if looking too long might expose something uncomfortable. Not panic, not crisis, just a quiet, persistent unease. They're not reckless, they're not ignorant. In fact, if you ask people around them, they'd probably be described as smart, capable, the one who has their life together. And yet somehow the number never feels like enough. It grows sometimes even significantly, but the feeling doesn't follow. That's the part no one explains, because the story we're told is simple. Smart people figure things out. They optimize, they learn, they make better decisions, and eventually financially it shows. But there's a strange contradiction hiding in plain sight. Some of the smartest people you'll ever meet stay broke, or at least feel like they are, no matter what the numbers say. And it's not because they don't understand money, it's because they understand something else too well. Picture this. It's a Tuesday night. Someone is sitting at their kitchen table with a laptop open, a spreadsheet glowing in soft blue light. There are tabs for expenses, investments, projections, numbers neatly organized, color-coded. It looks impressive. They scroll, adjust a value, recalculate something. Then they pause, their phone buzzes. A message from a friend. "Hey, are you coming this weekend? We booked that place." They type a reply. Delete it. Type again. Something about still figuring things out. Maybe this month's a bit tight, but it's not tight. Not exactly, it's just uncertain. So they stay home that weekend. Not because they can't afford it, because they can't feel that they can. That gap in between reality and feeling is where a lot of smart people get stuck, and they don't even realize it. There's a common assumption that financial behavior is driven by knowledge. If you understand interest rates, investments, budgeting, you'll be fine. But knowledge doesn't override your nervous system, and smart people, ironically, tend to build very sophisticated ways to justify what their nervous system is already afraid of. They don't say, "I'm scared." They say, "I'm being rational." They don't say, "I don't feel safe." They say, "I'm optimizing long-term outcomes." It sounds intelligent. It sounds responsible. But sometimes it's just fear, wearing a suit. Think about the way some people hesitate before buying something small, standing in a store, holding a basic item. Nothing extravagant. Maybe a slightly better version of something they already need. They check the price, put it back, pick it up again, open their phone, maybe even calculate something, compare options, look for justification. It's not about the item, it's about permission. And for a lot of smart people, permission is something they never fully give themselves because they've trained their mind to constantly simulate worst-case scenarios. What if income drops? What if something unexpected happens? What if this decision compounds into a pattern that leads somewhere bad? Their intelligence becomes a machine for generating caution. Useful in theory, paralyzing in practice. Here's another scene. A man gets a raise, a good one. For a few hours, maybe a day, there's a sense of relief, a quiet exhale. Then slowly, something shifts. He opens his expenses, starts adjusting. Now I should probably save more. Maybe I should invest more aggressively. I need to catch up. Within 2 weeks, the raise is gone. Not in reality, but in feeling. The baseline moved. The relief didn't stay, because the problem was never the number. It was the relationship to it. Smart people are very good at solving problems, so they treat money like a problem to solve. But money for most people is not just a problem, it's a proxy for safety, for control, for identity, for worth. And when something carries that much emotional weight, logic alone doesn't stabilize it. In fact, logic can make it worse, because you can always find a reason to feel like it's not enough. There's always a better strategy, a smarter allocation, a more optimal move. There's always someone doing it better. And if your sense of enough depends on optimization, it never arrives. There's a subtle behavior you start to notice once you see it. People who delay decisions that could improve their lives, not because they're risky, but because they're not perfectly optimized. They research for weeks, compare endlessly, wait for the ideal moment. They don't move, and time passes anyway. Opportunities close quietly, without drama. And from the outside, it just looks like patience. But inside, it's something else. It's avoidance disguised as intelligence. There's also a deeper layer. A lot of smart people grew up in environments where unpredictability was normal. Maybe money was inconsistent. Maybe security felt fragile. Maybe they learned early that things can disappear quickly. So they adapted. They became careful, thoughtful, hyper-aware. They learned to anticipate problems before they happen. That adaptation made them successful in many areas. But it also wired their system to treat stability as temporary. So even when things are objectively stable, it doesn't register, because the body is still waiting for the drop. You can see it in small moments. Refreshing a bank app multiple times a day, not because anything changed, but because the act itself feels like control. Double-checking subscriptions, rereading transactions, holding off on replacing something broken, even when it's clearly time. Not out of discipline, out of hesitation. And the hesitation isn't about the object. It's about the underlying question. Am I safe enough to let go of this money? And for many, the answer never feels like a clear yes. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because from the outside, this can look like responsibility, frugality, discipline, financial awareness. And sometimes it is. But there's a line, and smart people are very good at standing right on it, without noticing they've crossed into something else. Because the behavior is rewarded. People admire caution. They praise restraint. No one questions the person who says, "I'd rather be safe." But safety, when it becomes the only lens, starts to shrink your life, quietly, without any dramatic warning signs. There's a woman who has been using the same worn-out chair for years. It squeaks. It leans slightly to one side. It's uncomfortable. She notices it every day. She's looked at replacements, even saved a few options. But every time she's about to buy one, something stops her. Maybe later. This one still works. It's not urgent. Months pass. The chair stays. And it's not about the chair. It's about the internal threshold for allowed. And that threshold keeps moving further away. Smart people don't just analyze the world. They analyze themselves. Constantly. They question their decisions, their impulses, their motivations, which sounds like self-awareness. But sometimes it becomes self-distrust. They don't trust a decision unless it can be fully justified. They don't trust a feeling unless it can be explained. And money decisions rarely feel clean, so they delay, or they default to the safest possible option, which often means no real change. There's a phrase that doesn't get said out loud very often. You can understand money and still feel poor, because feeling secure is not a calculation, it's a state. And states are shaped by history, not just logic. At some point, the question shifts, not how do I make more, or how do I manage better, but something quieter. What am I actually protecting? Because every cautious decision is protecting something. Maybe it's the fear of going back to a time when things felt unstable. Maybe it's the identity of being the responsible one. Maybe it's the belief that one wrong move could undo everything. And once you see that, the behavior starts to make sense, even if it's not helping anymore. There's a moment that happens to some people, usually not in a dramatic way. They're looking at their life, the numbers, the habits, the patterns, and something doesn't add up, not financially, emotionally. They've done everything right. They've avoided mistakes, stayed careful, made smart decisions. And yet, there's no sense of arrival, no feeling of ease, just a slightly upgraded version of the same tension. And that's when the realization starts to form. Carefulness by itself doesn't create safety. It just reduces exposure. And those are not the same thing. Real safety feels different. It's not the absence of risk. It's the ability to move without constantly bracing for loss. And that requires something most smart people struggle with. Not more knowledge, but more tolerance. Tolerance for imperfection, for uncertainty, for decisions that aren't fully optimized. Because life doesn't wait for optimal. It moves anyway. There's a simple, uncomfortable question that cuts through a lot of this. If nothing went wrong, would I still be making this decision? And most people don't like answering it honestly, because the answer often reveals that the decision isn't about strategy, it's about fear. This doesn't mean recklessness is the solution. It doesn't mean ignoring reality or pretending everything is fine. It means recognizing that being smart is not the same as feeling safe. And if you build your entire financial life around avoiding mistakes, you might succeed at that and still feel like you're losing. Somewhere along the way, the goal quietly shifted from building a life to preventing a collapse. And those are very different directions. One expands, the other contracts. There's a line that stays with people when they finally see it clearly. You don't need more proof. You need more permission. Permission to use what you've built, permission to trust your own stability, permission to stop treating every decision like a potential threat. Because at some point, the cost of constant caution becomes greater than the risk you're trying to avoid. It just doesn't feel that way until you notice what it's taken from you. Time, experiences, ease, the quiet ability to sit with what you have and not feel like it could disappear any second. And maybe that's the real shift. Not in your bank account, but in the way you relate to it. Because being smart got you here, but it won't by itself let you feel like you've arrived. For that, you need something else, something less precise, less measurable, and a little more uncomfortable. You need to stop asking, what's the safest move? And start asking, what would this decision look like if I trusted that I'll be okay?